The state and the defense using a lot of the same evidence to paint two very different pictures. Darrell Brooks cried in court as he faced charges that would send him to prison for the rest of his life. But the criminal complaint paints a picture of a man who acted deliberately and without emotion as he plowed down his victims, including children and the elderly. The state is blaming this entire mess on the incompatibility between Apple and Android phones. The defense disagrees and says they were sent the wrong file, but either way, they're asking the judge to declare a mistrial. The most shocking part of this whole hearing actually came at the end after the mics had been cut and people were starting to file out. Jake Patterson turned to all of us in the gallery as he was being let out and he said, "Bye, Jamie." It was an absolutely explosive day in the courtroom. The defense shocking everyone, including the prosecutor, by calling Kyle Rittenhouse to the stand in the middle of their case. This was probably the most important testimony of the trial so far. Gage Grosskreutz was shot in the arm. The jury actually saw very graphic video. His right bicep was essentially blown off. And the defense pointed to that video and said, look, Rittenhouse runs by Gage Grosskreutz. He talks to him. He doesn't fire his weapon. How could he be perceived as an active shooter? If Kyle Rittenhouse is found not guilty, then the drone video doesn't really matter because it didn't hurt the defense. However, if they do return guilty verdicts, then the judge is going to have to make a decision on that motion. And before he does that, he could even require testimony from tech experts and people to explain what happened to this file and how it got compressed into lower quality. Kyle Rittenhouse, a vigilante who provoked the situation and killed unarmed men, or a 17-year-old who wanted to protect property and help people if they had medical needs and was attacked and had to act in self-defense. That is a decision the jury is going to have to make. Earlier this week, the Milwaukee County District Attorney said in a statement that $1,000 cash bail was far too low, and they're looking into how that happened. But a closer look at this case shows Darrell Brooks skated the justice system on technicalities and oversights multiple times over the last several years. Darrell Brooks has more than a dozen convictions across 3 states in the last 2 decades.
There's a long history of flight, obstructing, bail jumping type behavior, Your Honor.
At the time of Sunday's attack, Brooks was out on bail in 2 Milwaukee County cases, the first from 2020. Brooks allegedly got in a fight with his nephew and shot at 2 people. He was in jail on a $7,500 cash bail and requested a speedy trial, meaning the case had to be heard within 90 days. But that didn't happen because the justice system is backed up, in part because of court closures coupled with a spike in crime during the pandemic.
So now we have this bottleneck situation where all these cases, these new cases, these older cases are trying to work its way through the system, and the judges and the prosecutors and law enforcement is doing their best to try and keep up with the volume.
To comply with the statute, bail was reduced to $500 and Brooks got out in February. On November 2nd, he allegedly tried to run the mother of his child over with a car. He then posted a $1,000 cash bail. Milwaukee County District Attorney John Chisholm says that bail was inappropriately low and an internal review is underway.
I don't think that this case, and while it appears like that at first blush, isn't a sign of the complete breakdown in the criminal justice system. I think this was an isolated incident that really happened as a culmination of a lot of different pressures on the criminal justice system right now, primarily because of COVID.
There is an active warrant for Brooks' arrest in Nevada after he failed to comply with sex offender registry requirements. Since that warrant was issued, Brooks has been arrested multiple times here in Wisconsin and in Georgia, but it's unclear if officials in either state had any idea he was wanted out west. The district attorney's office says they are still completing that internal review, but they expect the DA will sit down with us next week and answer some of these questions. None of the jurors wanted to speak after those verdicts were read, but we do have some insight into how they made this decision. That's because of the questions they asked. They did not ask many. It seems one of the most vital parts of this case and those deliberations was a 30-second drone video. The state got this drone video of the Joseph Rosenbaum shooting a week into the Kyle Rittenhouse trial and shifted their strategy, hanging their case on these 30 seconds. Prosecutor Thomas Binger made it the focus of his closing arguments.
I'm going to replay it a few times so you can see quite clearly that the defendant sets the fire extinguisher on the ground with his left hand and then brings his left hand over to the gun and raises it and points.
But the defense argued the video isn't clear and called it a desperate last-minute attempt by the state.
Provocation, another thing. Think back on November 2nd when this case started. Did you hear one word out of Mr. Binger's mouth about provocation. You didn't, because it was never said. But when his case explodes in his face, now he comes out with provocation.
The jury took notice, asking to see the drone video and slow motion versions during deliberations. They spent 46 minutes alone in the courtroom, watching it on multiple screens over and over, talking about what they saw. It was the very last question jurors asked. After that, they went back into the jury room for more than a day of deliberations before reaching these 5 verdicts.
Not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty, not guilty.
Before the verdicts were read, the judge warned there should not be any emotional outbursts in the courtroom. Still, we saw Kyle Rittenhouse's knees buckle as he fell, his mother and 2 sisters sobbing in the gallery. We also saw a lot of tears from the fiance of Joseph Rosenbaum and the girlfriend of Anthony Huber. Gut-wrenching details about James and Denise Kloss's final moments and the terror that Jamie endured all laid out in court today before the judge sent Jake Patterson to prison for the rest of his life.
County 911, where is your husband?
For the first time, we heard the desperate 911 call Denise Kloss made from the bathroom where she and Jamie huddled together as Jake Patterson tried to ram down the door. Some screams, then the line goes dead as the door gives way.
The nightmare of what they went through the early hours of that morning remains in my head every day.
During Friday's sentencing, the district attorney showed pictures, one underneath the bed where Patterson kept Jamie captive for 88 days, and the Kloss family asked the judge to sentence Patterson to the maximum.
My brother won't be able to walk down the aisle at a wedding day.
The most powerful words came from a letter written by Jamie. She says, though she's still struggling and scared, Patterson did not break her.
He can't take my freedom. He thought that he could own me, but he was wrong.
Patterson spoke briefly, apologizing.
I would do, absolutely anything to take back what I did,
But the judge didn't buy it.
You are the embodiment of evil.
Ultimately, Jake Patterson got the sentence Jamie wanted, life in prison with no chance of release.
He can't ever change me or take away who I am. He can't stop me from being happy and moving forward with my life.
Immediately after sentencing, Jamie's aunt spoke, thanking the community for all of their support and saying Jamie will probably have more to say at a later time, but now they want to move forward and begin to heal as a family.